Hi everyone, today we're going to take a look at another denoising AI software, this time from On1, and it's called NoNoise AI. And I'm going to compare it against Topaz's denoising AI and also against DxO's DeepPRIME denoising AI. And then I'll touch on a little bit about the features and the workflow and a couple of issues that have come up, but I'm not going to deep dive into that. I really just wanted to test the denoising algorithms between each software, essentially on auto settings, and see which one did the best job. So with that said, let's get started. So I'm going to be using the EM1 Mark III on this test scene here, and I picked 3 ISOs that I thought would be sort of relevant to this kind of test at 3200, at 6400, and then finally at 25,600. And let's see how On1 did with these raw images. All right, so on the left, I have the raw image, ISO 3200, and I only did a white balance and crop, but no other processing was applied. And let's go ahead and punch in. I have the denoise or NoNoise AI on the right. And I think on the color card, you can see it did an excellent job bringing back the darker squares, bringing back all of the color with no noise. Let's take a quick look here in the corner. This is where I like to look at negative space. And yeah, it did a great job cleaning up all this negative space here and then retaining all of the detail in the flash. And you can read all of the numbers very clearly over here with no noise. And then going over to the Pen F, let's take a look here. We got really good detail on the knurling on the dials. Great job here on the text, 37 millimeters. And then inside the barrel, this negative space, this looks really good. Let's see how it did at ISO 6400. And if we punch in on the card, really good job on the colors and taking the noise out, retaining detail. And then over here on the darker squares, pretty good. Brought back, I think you can still see these are squares, although there is some wrinkling effect on these darker areas, but not bad. And then let's go over to the negative space. Still very, very clean. Good job cleaning that up. And then looking at the numbers on the flash, we can still read 6432. Did a great job here. And then let's look at the Pen F. And I think it really did an excellent job. All of the detail on the buttons here, or the dials with the knurling. Still very clearly we can read the text here. And then finally inside the barrel, good job cleaning up this negative space. But there's a tiny bit of wrinkling here. It may be hard to see, but there's a line here and a couple lines here. And then finally at ISO 25,600, good job retaining all of the colors very nicely. And in the really dark shadowy areas, you can see now there's noise creeping in and what look like wrinkles to me. Let's go over to the negative space. And yeah, the negative space didn't quite clean up as well this time, right? Still have some noise and some wrinkles and smudging. But the detail itself, I think, is pretty good. We can still read most of the letters here and half the numbers in here. Like the 3 and the 2 are pretty much obscured, but you know, everything else looks pretty good. But as photographers, we have context. We have certain expectations what these letters are, right? And what these words would be. So let's go over here. And yeah, good job cleaning that up best it can. Good job with the detail on the dials. And then here inside the barrel, we can still see the rings. You know, the lettering is pretty much smudged. And then the negative space inside the barrel has got, still has noise and some weird wrinkling effect. And we kind of see this everywhere in the image, where it should be sort of a glare, but instead of that, it's creating kind of these wrinkles in the image. But Overall, it's not bad. I think the most impressive thing here really at ISO 25,000 is how I was able to retain the colors pretty much and keep them fairly accurate to the original raw image. Okay, let's take a look at On1 versus DxO. We'll punch into the color card. We're at ISO 3200. And I think both did a good job. The On1 seemed to do a little bit more sharpening than DxO did in this case. And of course on DxO there's some sharpening sliders as well as on the no noise. So these could probably be adjusted to look up more, a little closer, but just by default, the On1 is just a hair bit sharper, if maybe a little bit over sharpened. Here on the negative space, we're still looking good on the numbers here on the flash. And yeah, the negative space is definitely cleaner on the DxO side. And let's go over here. Looking good on the dials, looking good on the text, 37 millimeters. And then in negative space, I think both did a great job here. But overall, there's definitely a little more saturation and color on the DxO DeepPRIME side. And I'd say it's probably even a little more accurate in that respect, which, with a color card and a color correction workflow, you could easily fix these to match, virtually identical otherwise. All right, at 6400, let's take a look at the color card. And definitely we're starting to see some sharpening artifacts. Like on this brown square, I see some wrinkles along the sides and edges. And a little bit here on the blue as well. Let's take a look at the numbers here. Still very legible, 432. And that's a little FT, I believe, in the corner, maybe an M, I'm not sure. And then on the negative space, I'd say DxO is a little smoother. Maybe just because of the contrast, it's a little darker. And the numbers and dials all look good in here. In the barrel, I think both did a good job, but again, I'm starting to see tiny wrinkles in here, whereas I don't have them here. It's a little smoother. And then finally at ISO 25,000, punching into the color card. Yeah, the wrinkles are very strong now due to the extra sharpening. And I did try to reduce the sharpening actually this time on the On1 NoNoise, and it didn't make that much difference, to be honest. The wrinkles were still there. Like here in this corner here, but not here. Let's go to the negative space. And yeah, the numbers are almost unlegible, though we can kind of make them out. I'd say both did a fair job considering the original ISO. And then on the negative space, yeah, DxO is definitely cleaner, especially along the wood here on the divider. And then let's go to the Pen F. The knurling on the dials look good, not bad. The numbers are, yeah, pretty much smudged. I mean, we know it says 37 millimeters, but that would be hard to tell if we didn't know that already. And then again, in the barrel, on the negative space, much better job with the DeepPRIME. And then looking at the colors, I'd say actually the colors on the On1 NoNoise are more accurate this time than on the DxO. And I think what happened is there's a lot of purple noise in the ISO 25,000, and that got kind of blended in together on the DxO DeepPRIME side, whereas on On1, it didn't do that quite as much, although there seems to be, less contrast and less saturation overall. Okay, let's look at On1 versus Topaz DeNoise AI. And at 3200, if we punch in onto the color card, yeah, I really feel like the On1 did a better job here, even though it's slightly over sharpened. we still have noise in all the color tiles here. Those didn't smooth out too well. And then over here, I have, yeah, it's definitely cleaner on the On1 side. The negative space actually looks better on the Topaz side, but the details are pretty good. And over here, I think both have good detail, but there's definitely more noise on the Topaz side, especially here inside the barrel and outside the barrel as well, although the text is legible on both. Okay, at ISO 6400, let's take a look. Both are looking really good, but the here in the color tiles, there's definitely more noise on the Topaz side here on the right. And in the negative space, yeah, the deeper blacks here in contrast are kind of hiding some of the noise that it has, but I think the pulling details both did a pretty good job. But I think, again, the On1 did a better job overall. And then over here, still good detail on the dials here. Good detail on the lens barrel. And then inside the barrel, I'd call it almost a draw. But on the outside where there's, you know, in the lighter tones, there's definitely more noise here. And then overall, I think the colors, definitely there's better contrast with the Topaz. And the colors are a little bit less red. Whereas in real life, I think the On1 is showing a little bit more accurate color. There's just a hair bit more red tones, I believe, on the On1 side. All right, then finally at 25,000, let's take a look at the color card. Yeah, it looks good on the On1 side. The Topaz side, yeah, there's still a lot of noise. I mean, it cleaned up a lot, but there's still a lot of noise, but less sharpening done. Go over to the negative space. I'd give Topaz a little bit of an edge here because I don't like what On1 did with the noise. Because now instead of just noise, we have wrinkles and smudging in the negative space, whereas on the Topaz side, it's a little smoother overall. There's not quite as much smudging and wrinkling. And then on the detail side, I think both did a good job on the detail. You know, it's just a little bit over sharpened again on the On1 side, but good job on both. And then here, the dials look good. Again, over sharpened on the On1 side. But then in the negative space on the barrel, even on the highlight areas, I'm seeing some creasing and wrinkling that I'm not getting. I'm getting a more smooth, more natural looking noise on the Topaz side, in my opinion. And then overall on the colors, tough to say. The real colors are probably something in between these two, but I'd give the edge to On1 on color accuracy here. And I did white balance adjust these, you know, with the color card. Now between On1 and Topaz DeNoising AI, I would probably still push you towards the On1. I think it did a little better job across all the ISOs, but there's one exception again, and it comes with Fujifilm. I did run into an issue with the On1 processing Fujifilm, my Fujifilm X-T30 files, and I assume this is going to happen across their X-Trans sensors. So let me show you what that looks like. So on the left, I have the Fujifilm RAW file from my X-T30. On the right, I have one processed by On1. And if I punch into the color card, I want you to notice anything that has the color red in it. Look at this tile, and this tile. So it seems like the On1 is, like, look at this tile here. It's having problems with the demosaicing process of Fujifilm X-Trans sensor, particularly with the red pixels. It's not just on the color card, but anywhere that has red, like look at the little logo here, a red part or trim on the Nikon, and then these flowers back here. And it didn't matter what ISO it was at. If I processed an XT30 file with On1, I was getting this sort of, stripes in my reds. So as you can see, there's still no perfect AI software. I mean, they each have kind of their strengths and weaknesses. So let me kind of go over them real quick. Money No Object, I think the best software would still be the DxO Photolab 4 Elite with the DeepPRIME built in. And it really did the best job across the board in terms of ISO and reducing noise. The downsides being no Fujifilm X-Trans sensors, right? If you have an XT30, XT4, you can't use it. I don't recommend it then. The other downside is it takes a long time to process. It's really CPU intensive. It was taking 45 seconds to a minute to process one image. So if you're batch processing 20, 30, 100 images at a time, you're going to be waiting a while. And I even heard of a bug where the batch processing like more than 20 files at a time, there's some file system error or bug. It didn't process all of the image. Now that not a deal breaker for me, but that's something you want to test for if you download the trial and see if it works on your machine, because it seems to be kind of machine specific. It's not happening to everybody. So those are the two drawbacks, right? It's slow and it doesn't work with Fujifilm. And the integration with Lightroom is not great. I'm not crazy about it, but if I have Photolab 4 Elite, I don't have to create a separate TIFF file. I can just work with it in Photolab 4 Elite directly with the raw image, then export the JPEG when I'm done. Now, Topaz, I think, has the best integration between Lightroom and the denoising engine. It's very smooth. You select an image in Lightroom, goes to Topaz, process it, click whatever sliders and AI model that you want to use, and it comes right back in the Lightroom and you're good to go. Very, very smooth. But I don't think the denoising AI engine is quite as strong as it is in the other two. But I really haven't heard any major issues with Topaz in terms of like batch processing problems or any other kind of problems. It's very polished in that respect. So good job there. And it takes about 30 seconds to process a single image. So, 30 to 50% faster than DxO, and better workflow, but not quite as good noise reduction over, say, 3200 or 6400. So this brings us to On1, and I think the denoising AI engine is better than Topaz and as good as DxO up to about 6400 ISO. Then I think DxO pulls away by far at that point. But it has really one huge advantage over the other two software. One is it's very fast. I mean, 5 seconds to denoise an image and process it. Topaz was taking 30 plus seconds, and DxO takes 45 seconds to a minute. So On1 DeNoise AI is 5 to 10 times faster than the other two. That could be huge, especially if you're batch processing. And, some of the disadvantages really, the demosaicing on Fuji X-Trans sensors like my XT30, they need to fix that. One other workflow issue I ran into was something to do with lens corrections. So if I open up a raw file directly in On1, denoise it, I have to export it at this point as a TIFF or a JPEG, right? And I can no longer apply the lens corrections to that file in Lightroom. So I'm getting this sort of lens distortion a little bit. So maybe I'm doing something wrong, but that was a problem for me. And then, so now you have your raw file, you have an uncorrected TIFF file or JPEG. So the workaround is, for now, is to export the raw image with the lens corrections applied to a TIFF image. Then you can denoise the TIFF image and then go back and edit it in Lightroom or whatever application. That said, now you have two files again, right? You have a raw image and a TIFF image. And the other challenge, according to On1, is that it does its best denoising on raw images. It will not denoise quite as well using TIFF or JPEG or any other format. Now, I didn't see any difference. When I compared my TIFF images with my raw images, it looked like the AI engine was doing equally as good a job on both, but On1 is saying that there's some potential there for it not to do as good a job on other file formats other than RAW. So just keep that in mind. And that's something, again, you guys should download every one of these software and see which one works best for you. So I have my affiliate links down below for all the free trials. And if you decide to purchase one, it helps the channel out a lot. And if you have any questions or comments, just leave them down below. But either way, I appreciate you guys watching, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.